Awesome. We are live. Well, it's exciting to be here with you today, Mel. Like, obviously, people who are coming have been able to read like the blurb that we have shared about you. But can you start off by telling us who you are, sharing a bit of your expertise, kind of, what makes you amazing and unique in the world, that kind of thing?
Thank you. And it's super exciting to be here, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, I am Mel MacIntyre. I was just saying to Jessica, I'm having one of those days. Sorry, let me make sure my phone's on airplane mode. Having one of those days where I can't quite remember exactly who I am and what I do.
We all
We
have
all have
those.
them. We all have them, particularly as women, because we're cyclical creatures. And that's kind of a lot of what we'll talk about today, I think.
Mm.
But I'm Mel MacIntyre. I'm a women's leadership coach. I am an executive coach. I'm a business mentor. I love working with women who really have a calling to make a difference in the world. They have a strong sense of mission, um, but sometimes their ambition and their drive and their sense of purpose can be it can really sabotage them. Because if we're not careful, it can end up leading us into overwhelm, burnout, constant plate spinning. So I really love putting well-being at the heart of the work that I do, so that I help my clients to really create a lifestyle, a business, a career that lets them have it all, that lets them have a massive impact in the world, but also have more time with their family, more time for themselves, to do the things that light them up, that really enable them to be the leader that the world needs them to be.
Oh, I love
Um,
it.
Thank you. And do you want me to say a wee bit about my background and stuff as well?
Yeah, that would be awesome. I think it's always like really interesting, isn't it? Like when you're listening to someone to understand like where they've been and sort of like what iterations and what versions of
Yeah.
themselves have already been. So yeah, I love it when people share stuff like that.
Thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't even know what life I'm on now, but we're a few in. I've got a few significant, very different, very distinct chapters in my life. My career, I started out in the corporate world, and I was a real career girl. Like, I loved climbing the ladder. I was always going for the next promotion. I always had a strategy about, I understand I'm going to do this, and then I'll do that, and then I'll get to that place. Um, really loved my work. I've always been in people development. I've always been a coach. I've been a coach for over 20 years. So I kind of started off um, doing a lot of learning and development and training work, and then made my way up the career ladder. And I've done roles as management consultant. I've worked with organisations all over the world. I've headed up operations. I've been responsible for kind of strategy, for change and transformation across organisations. And I loved it. I really loved it. I loved what I did. I've always been really curious about what makes people tick. How can you get the best out of people to enhance the organisation of the performance of an organisation? And then one day, 8 years ago, I had a breakdown, and my world kind of stopped. And I stopped my world, and I got off, and I took some time. I kind of did the thing that made no logical sense, but that felt like the only thing I could do, which was give up my life as I knew it and start over again. And that was what led me to having my business that I have now. So I've been in business for about 7 years, which has been a fascinating journey. It's not for the light-hearted, right? It's not for the
Yeah.
faint. It's having a and I've become a mum since then. I live on this tiny little island in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. That was a curveball. I'm a city girl. I love to travel. I never really saw that happening. So I think if I could boil it down into a sentence, I really felt my soul calling me towards something, and I just decided one day to answer that. And this is what's led me here,
I
really.
love that. That's like Mel, we are so aligned. Like we are so aligned. And like I can't remember if I told you this, like my breakdown was 12 years ago and
Yeah.
like had a really similar experience, just like that's the end of that life.
Yeah.
Now we're starting something
Now
completely
what?
new. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? It's good to make that kind of change, but sometimes it comes on us at a point where we're not choosing that consciously. And
Mhm.
it's something that we are being given the opportunity for. But for a while, you're like, if this is a gift, what is the returns policy?
Totally. Totally. I've had moments where it's like, can I just get off now? Like, can I just get off the bus? This feels so extreme. But of course, the more, I suppose I really believe in polarity, right? That the more extreme your experiences are, like the more difficult and challenging things are, the more capacity it gives you to experience real joy and real,
Mm,
beauty in your life. And I love to play within that contrast. And I love to be a safe space for my clients
mm,
as they experience that, because that's what growth and transformation and really fulfilling your potential is all about, isn't it?
yeah.
It isn't for the faint-hearted. It is the road less traveled. Not everybody does do it, but when you hear the call, when you feel the call, it's
Mm,
futile not to answer it,
yeah.
right? Because it keeps coming back at you in different ways from different angles. And in my experience, my body was physically screaming at me. My mental health was really,
Yeah.
really challenged. And so it got to the point where it was like, I don't know how many more ways I can tell you that this is not, like, you need to make changes in your life. So
Mm,
that was how it showed up for me. And that's often how it shows up for a lot of my clients as well, because a lot of the women that I work with, and I do work with men, but I'm called to work with women, they're at that turning point
mm,
and they might have experienced some really challenging things going on, or they're in the midst of it.
yeah.
Um, and it's calling them to that truth, to that, well, what do I really want? And what do I
Mm.
really want my life to look like? What's the legacy that I want to create in my life? And that's where, yeah, I love to play in that space.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So today we are thinking about and talking about women leaders. The world needs more women who lead.
Yes,
We are both like fully on board with that, aren't we? Um,
definitely.
where do you think we've got to kind of in the world? Like,
Mm,
it's been really interesting. I've like seen a few different conversations over the last few weeks and talking about things like kind of lowered expectations of women and women recounting experiences of like where they have sort of been assumed to not be able to do something because there's not a man
mm,
present or something like that.
mm,
Like what's your feeling, Mel, on sort of where we are up to with like women leaders? Is that something that we still have a ton of work to do to actually carve out space, like, or are we starting to see a bit of a turning point where like it's actually just it's all opening up for women? What's your take on
mm.
that?
So I think this is a really fascinating question. I think we're so there's kind of two. I'm going to give two answers to this, and I'll give a bit more background to both of them. One is, I really, really deeply believe we're at a tipping point in society where the old, outdated way of doing business, of leading, of doing politics, it's crumbling before our very eyes.
Mm,
And so many people are seeing it for what it really is that this fundamentally doesn't work. So that's a very exciting opportunity. On the flip side, I think we're in a very dangerous place, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, we've done the work on women. We've done the work on gender. No, we haven't. The statistics tell us we're nowhere near where we need to be.
mm,
And the opportunity is absolutely huge. But if we look at a lot of the research that's been done, on one hand, it says people want more of the typical characteristics and qualities that women tend to have more of, or that are associated with women. And what I mean by that are things like compassion,
mm,
empathy, connection, honesty. That's what research is telling us across the world, loud and clear. People want more of. That's what they want from their leaders. It's how they want to be led.
mm-hmm,
So we know that there is a real appetite for that, but there are still a lot of old, outdated structures in place that stop women from having equality of access to opportunities. So, for example, it's very difficult for women to get funding for their businesses as entrepreneurs.
mm,
And there's a raft of research around that. Women have different types of societal and structural issues, like we have a higher caring load, right? And some of these are external barriers, Jessica, but I see a lot of internal barriers as well, and I'm
mm,
sure you do too. So the internal barriers that I see typically are things like imposter syndrome. Well, of course, we often feel like imposters. We're trying to perform at our best in a world that is not designed for us, that was
Yeah.
not made by us. And we are fundamentally different, right? Biologically, we're different. We were just chatting about the fact that, there are days throughout the month where our energy levels are very different. We feel like doing different things. That's because we have hormones and chemicals and a biology that's designed that way.
Mm.
Yet we're expected to be on all the time. That's not how it works for us. So I
Mm.
think there are some real, I think, like I said, there's great opportunity. It's a very exciting moment to be alive. But my God, we've got work ahead of us. I think there is a lot for us to do. And the danger to me is this rhetoric, and I've heard people say it almost like, well, we've ticked that box, like we've done the work on that, but we're
Mm.
not where we need to be. So we need to keep going.
Yeah, and so many things come into my brain because it's the little things, isn't it? Like I can't even think of the name of the book. I'm having a complete mental blank, but it's that like so much of like industry, so much of like the products that we use, they're geared around
Yeah.
men. And like
Yeah.
even like the shape of
I
cars.
know
Like,
the
do you
books you
remember?
mean. I know the
Yeah.
books you mean. I've got it on my bookshelf.
But like like I think it was Nissan who, or maybe it was Fiat, but like one of the car companies, they started making more womany cars, and I just remember they made like a little like hole in the back of the headrest so that if you had a ponytail,
Ponytail,
and I was
yeah,
like, not all
absolutely.
women have long hair. And so like maybe they can't win on stuff like that, but
Yeah.
like serious stuff like healthcare. um
Mhm.
a lot of the protocol for heart attacks was geared around male
That's
patients,
right.
and female heart attacks present completely differently.
Completely.
But also like the crisis that I think we're seeing like across the West with maternity care and
Yeah.
women's health issues like the HRT, non-availability, and sort
Yeah.
of all the debates around that kind of stuff. I feel like I think I share that feeling of like there's so much progress, and yet there's still so much that is frustrating.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have those thoughts like, I wonder what it feels like to be a man and just be like, at 20, I've got like the run of my life, like
Yeah.
up until I retire, to do whatever I like and to throw myself into my career as much as possible. Whereas for women, it's not, if you want to have children, it's not that straightforward. And yes, like I actually live in a very like equality based household, and my
Me
husband at the
too.
moment, he does 8 out of 10, literally the 10 school runs in the week, he does 8 of them, I do too. So i go
Mhm.
i go on the school run and my friends are like, we never see you. And I'm like, i'm always, I'm always doing other things.
Yeah, that's by design.
Exactly. And I think it starts at that kind of in
Yeah.
our own lives, doesn't it? Like if we're feeling like I need more space to be able to achieve the things that I want to achieve, like it's important for us to actually step into that ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
And have those
Claim it.
difficult conversations
And
like,
claim it for ourselves.
mm,
Absolutely.
mm,
Absolutely. I think as well, another internal barrier that I see, and this, I mean, we could do a whole conversation only on this, and that's shame.
mm,
The role that shame plays for us as women, and in society, and how pervasive it is and how difficult it is to unravel that.
yeah.
I think there's so much that women tend to feel guilty about,
Mm,
and they perhaps, so I'll give you an example. I love to work with women on helping them to really, really unlock their biggest ideas that will help them to generate a lot more wealth. I think you're similar in your work too, right?
yeah, absolutely.
But it's not just about the external structures and the strategies and the processes to bring the money in. It's about you being able to like physically and energetically open up to feel worthy to
Mm,
receive.
mm,
And that's
yeah.
such an important part of the work. And I actually feel that as women in particular, because of the things we're talking about today, we have a responsibility to earn more money, because we have a responsibility to steward it with love and
Mm,
compassion and empathy. There's more than enough money in the world for everybody. That's not the issue. The issue is it's not spread out evenly, right?
mm,
So we need to claim some of that, and we know that we spend it well. We spend it with a lot more ethics and compassion. Again, there's a lot of research to support that. We share it, and so I really feel like it's almost like you have a responsibility You know, it's a
Mm,
call to action. Get out your own way here. It's not just about you and your limiting beliefs and all the stories that you're telling yourself. It's a bigger than that. This is about how we really create a monumental shift and a seismic shift in society to really create equality. And it does start with things like what you charge.
mm. Yeah,
It really,
absolutely. And I think that there's like a whole kind of web of scarcity that women can get caught up in through not charging what
yes,
they should do, through spending all their time with people who don't see their value and therefore tell them that they're too expensive and they need to be cheaper. I do
yeah,
think that it becomes like this really problematic like mindset thing that is completely
yeah,
self-reinforcing, because if you spend time with the wrong clients, they're going to give you the wrong feedback
yeah,
and you feel like you're the problem, when
yeah,
actually like the key thing is find the people who are looking for you, find the people who take it
yeah,
seriously, who see your value. Like it just, everything works so much better when we don't kind of play that race to the bottom. But
yeah,
I think what you said there, Mel, was really interesting, because I think there can be a certain amount of pressure on our shoulders almost as like the first generation of women in this country, at least, to have the freedoms and the
mm.
opportunities that we have had. You know, 100 years ago, well, I don't know about you, but neither of my grandmothers went to university. I don't
Well,
even think either of them could drive.
no, my grandmother brought up 9 kids with no running water.
Mm,
She was a peasant to all intents and purposes.
yeah.
That was a generation ago in my family, and
Mm,
that is not lost. And I now live in the place where she brought up her kids. I've been called home here. I think I know why. It's beginning to become a bit clearer.
mm,
Um, but you know, really breaking that generational um, scarcity and
mm,
poverty and unlocking all the potential that's there for future generations, that really matters to me. And this is so new for us, isn't it? I mean, we
mm,
women only got the vote 100 or so years ago,
mm.
you know, and we were property,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Not that long ago.
it's
You know,
it's amazing, isn't
it
it, that
times,
the
isn't
world
it?
has changed so much and there is so much more equality, and yet like it's that kind of that lowered expectation about women. And
Yeah,
I don't know, even in my lifetime, like women were, like when I grew up in the 80s, like women were expected to sort of be the hostess. Like I have a real thing about it even to this day, and it's because one of my early jobs, like my job was kind of to walk in with like a tray of tea for all the men who are going to do important things. And like even now, I'm just like, if you come to my house, like you'd be lucky if you get a drink from me.
yeah, I'm the
And if my
hostess.
husband's there, I'll pretty much
I love,
always make him do
yeah.
it.
So what do you get? I'm a feeder. You get everything when you come to my house. I love to feed people and water people, and
Well,
yeah, I
that's the
love
weird
all
thing, because
that.
yeah, like probably my thing is like making Sunday lunch for people. I can do like a Sunday lunch for 15 people,
Yeah,
but I just have a real thing about being the person who like brings in the tray
yeah.
of drinks.
It's
That is
that
so not me.
conditioning, right? It is
Yeah,
the conditioning
exactly.
that we're
And I
talking
think
about.
it's we have to be willing to step out of that,
Hmm.
but we also have to know how to engage with people who haven't yet stepped out of that and
Yeah,
might, you know, like I don't know if you've experienced this, but I know I did in my career, that people would take one look at me and assume that if I was the smallest or the youngest in the room, then I was the most junior. And quite often I
absolutely.
was the most senior. So
Yeah,
like, you know, I think it can be a real, it can be a real exercise in growth just to navigate those situations and the
yeah.
constant frustration of like, I am being assumed to be less than I am. Like you have to fight very hard against that, don't you,
Yeah.
for a long period of time.
And still, and you know, I hear it all the time. And I'm an ambassador for an organisation called Women's Enterprise Scotland, and one of the reasons they're a research based, they're just an amazing organisation, and they do a lot of research. They do a lot of work to promote women in business. They do a lot of kind of lobbying of government and stuff, and we also give them our lived experience, and we contribute to the research. And the stories you hear
Mm,
are crazy. You know,
mm,
women who are incredibly successful, they've built multi-million pound businesses. There's another director who's a man, and then there's them, and then everybody directs, and it's them who's built the company. Still to this day, people are directing information or
mm,
questions or comments to the man in the room. And I mean, it's pretty infuriating if you
mm,
let it be. But also the role model, like role models is so important for us as women. That's a thing that's particularly supportive and particularly helpful. So you know, people like you and I doing this today really matters. It really
Mm,
matters to be able to say there is another way. You can be authentic. You don't need to fake it. You can do things your way and be incredibly successful as a
mm,
woman. You can be present with your kids. You can ask for help. I think that was one of the biggest turning points I've maybe experienced myself, was learning to ask for help. That was very hard for me. I found it incredibly difficult. I
yeah.
had built up, you know, just this kind of almost defensive self-sufficiency, you know, that if I want it, I'm going to get it. I'm a very determined person, but recognizing that that's actually what leads to your burnout a lot of the time.
Mm,
Ask for the help that you need. You know, create the support network. If it's not there, go and find it. Connect with communities, other women. If there isn't one, create one. You
yeah.
know, whatever you want, go and make it happen. It's very, and actually, you'll find that there's a lot of support out there once you start to do a little bit of searching around and digging around. I don't know if you've found that as well, Jessica, but there's a lot of amazing people out there who really want to help you be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that I'm most encouraged by is that it really does feel like, I don't know, even 10 years ago, it was kind of like to be sort of equal to a man, you have to behave like a man. And
Mm,
so there was a whole generation of women, I think, who sort of rose the ranks in corporates by just denying themselves completely and sort of having to
mhm.
put on this sort of
Yeah.
more male persona. But what I feel really excited about is that women are women are showing up authentically in business in a way that I don't think they've ever had permission
Mhm,
to. And there's still a distance to go on that. But like what I have found in my business is that like women have their own ecosystem of business. Like
mhm,
most, probably 98% of the people that I speak to are women. 100% of the people who work for me are women. Like there are these whole ecosystems that are
mhm,
emerging where women are just saying, do you know what? We trust each other. We have goodwill towards each other.
mhm,
We can act in good faith. And it's not saying that you never get that, because of course you do,
mhm.
because there's always examples of that, like in the
Yeah.
wider world. But I think it has been something I've observed uniquely through the online business world. It is a space that is very dominated by women, and yet it's not dominated by women like in the money that people are making. I think
Mhm,
there's a lot of space for women to be stepping into the fact that they can create wealth. It's something that I
mhm,
am really passionate about in my business, and sort of allowing women to see themselves as like people with agency.
yeah.
Actually, they can create opportunities, they can create wealth, it can benefit them, it can also benefit that whole like network of women around them. It doesn't
Mm.
have to be something which, because I think we often have like a bit of a thing of like, oh, I don't know if it's okay for me to create wealth for myself.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Well,
feel
people,
right.
well, because so often people are too worried about what people might think.
Mm. And maybe we have that programming of like, actually, like as a woman, you are there for the benefit of other people.
Yeah,
You are the hostess. It's your
yeah,
job to be there with the tray. And like, with our own biology as well,
yeah.
like having children, nurturing children, that isn't something that just happens. It's something that we have to give ourselves. As women, we literally give our bodies like to to nurture our children, to bring them forth in the first place. So but what I love is that there are just these whole like circles of opportunities opening up all over the world for women to be able to have that independence in a way that I don't think they ever have done really before.
Mhm. Definitely. And, you know, I think there are still, for sure, there are still barriers, and it's easier for, I mean, some of us have privilege. It's easier for some than it is for
Mm,
others. There's no doubt about it. I mean, what the challenges we face as women when you're a woman of color, that exponentially grows, especially when it comes to things like access to finance.
mm, yeah.
So
Well,
I think,
access to healthcare and education in the first place, like those
yeah,
have massive, like being born into poverty, it has a massive impact on people. And yeah, I think, those models where they look at kind of equity and like, have you seen the video where they have the people and they all start in the same place, and then you step forward if you've had parents who stayed married to each other, or you step forward if
mm,
you finished
I
your
do
education,
not.
all of,
I
you know,
understand. Yeah,
it has a massive impact, and I think it's absolutely right to show awareness of that in a conversation like this, because
definitely.
like, yes, like we're talking about issues relating to women, but I think women of color and women in minorities, I think that can have a completely like magnified effect.
It does, definitely, definitely. And as white women, it's up to us to get the education that we need so that we can ensure that we are using our privilege to the benefit of all women.
Mm,
Because it's easy to, like, of course, and all of us have bias that's unconscious. We all do, right? We all
mm,
do. I've got a new women's leadership program I'm kicking off in September, and I'm inviting in a couple of guest speakers to really do some great work with us on being a leader of the future, understanding what it means to be anti-racist.
that's so
You know?
important.
It's so important, right? And also another great, an amazing woman that I know who's just got a PhD in belonging and inclusion, bringing her in to help us to really, get under the skin of what does it really
Mm,
mean to belong and to offer belonging to others, and to get some funded places for women to attend that program who have
yeah.
social enterprises, who again are leaders of the future, to be able to give them the next, it's just simple things, but taking
Mm,
that time to think about what are some of the things that I can do that I've maybe never done before, that just give, that just really help me walk the talk of what it is that I want to see in the world. And I think if we all do that, that's how we
mm,
change the world without even really having to try very hard,
yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
more mindful and thoughtful and intentional about it.
What's your feeling, Mel? Like, do you think that women leaders are sort of changing, or like space is being made for them in the workplace? Or do you think actually women leaders are changing the workplace altogether?
Hmm. That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure if I've got a black and white. I think both, to be honest. I think both. Um, I've worked for some great female leaders, um, who, for sure, felt at an unconscious level that the way that they needed to be successful was to do it in a more masculine way,
Mm,
and perhaps adapt. No, repress. That's the word, because that's what I was doing. I
mm,
was repressing big elements of who I was in order to fit within the box of high performance.
mm,
And it wore me down. I just couldn't do it any longer. There was bits of me that I was really denying that felt very important. And actually, they are the things that make me really good at what I do.
mm,
So I think, in fact, someone asked someone. I dropped a little email out to my people today to say I was coming on here. Come and join us, and if you can't make it live, let me know if you've got any questions. And someone said they were actually going to an event about leadership and midwifery, and
mm,
she wanted to talk. She wanted to ask a question about when women are just getting into leadership at an early, like that kind of first leadership position, what's some of the advice that you would have for them? And I think
mm.
that's a really crucial point, right? It's a very tender place. It's a very tender point, and that's the point where you're being asked to step into another role. And if you're not careful, you begin acting like what you see around you, and what you see
Yeah.
around you could be really dysfunctional.
Mm,
So when I was reflecting on this, and I'd love your input as well, but when I was reflecting on this, there was a couple of things that came to mind. One was that you really learn to listen, and not listen to respond, but you really learn to listen to hear, really hear and understand what other
mm,
people's perspectives are, really understand what it's like for those who look to you for leadership. Um, and once you've done that, be sure to acknowledge that reality for people, because if you can understand that, if you can demonstrate, sorry, that you really understand their lived reality, they're going to hear you. That's what's
mm,
going to help them listen to you. That's what's going to help them hear you. So that was one thing, and I think the other thing that felt really important to me was empathy. A real sense of empathy and compassion. That whoever you see in front of you, you don't just take people at face value. You take that time to really aim to understand what that person's experience might be, what their lived experience might be, so that you can meet them from that place, rather than just the kind of external presentation or even the behaviour that they're presenting with. What about you, Jessica? What do you think about that question? I thought it was a great question.
Well, yeah, like I feel like it takes real courage and real like visionary ability to like see a culture that is all around you, and to exactly what you're saying, not step into that and do exactly the same thing too. Especially when you're new to leadership, when like maybe you're quite like young in your career. So I think it is so valuable almost to not just like have integrity with yourself when like people are watching, but maybe have integrity with yourself like when no one's watching, and just, you know, be in that space where actually, yes, you will do the thing that feels right. And like if you get that feeling, that intuition of like, I'm being asked to do stuff here which does not go with my values and my feeling of like how the world should be, I actually think as women we have an amazing opportunity to point out all of the stuff that's been wrong up until this current point. And like if that doesn't embolden us to do something better, then like I don't know what will. So I feel like there is that real opportunity with that, but to be conscious of that, because I think often like with hindsight we can be conscious of like, oh yeah, like I felt out of integrity in that role when I, you know, was doing that particular kind of work or in that particular culture or context. But I think sort of being forward thinking and sort of it's having that bigger picture, like that ability to zoom out and just be like, see the bigger picture. Because I don't know if you find this, Mel, but I do. Like day-to-day life, it doesn't always feel like you're kind of, you know, ascending a great mountain and it's the best journey you've ever been on. Like you can just get sucked into the day-to-day very easily and just like stop feeling inspired and stop sort of having that bigger vision of what everything could be. So I think sort of retaining that ability to show up every day like it's like the best day full of opportunity that you've ever had, it's really tricky to do that. But I think as I get older, like, and probably I'm having a little bit of a midlife crisis. I turn 40 this year. I know 40 is not old, but like I think it definitely it gives you pause, doesn't it, to ask those questions. Am I using the decades well? Like by the time you get to that point, like you've had a few, and it's kind of like, how am I going to live with intention from this point forward? So I think definitely me sort of in my mid-20s and 30s, I didn't have that perspective. I just felt like I had to just plod on with the stuff that I was in. Whereas now I really feel that. And I think that's the advice that I would probably give to someone in a younger state of just like, you will really blow people away if you can hold those two things, like the day-to-day and the bigger picture together. And that doesn't just happen. You need support, you need people around that, you need like a lot of kind of work to be going in, you know, personally, you know, doing the personal work. I say this all the time in my podcast, it makes a huge difference. Business growth and personal growth, they go together. Absolutely. But like that's true whatever kind of leader you are, whatever kind of context you're in. So kind of being conscious of that and like being aware of what you're carrying as you're doing it. I don't know, would you agree with that?
Definitely. And I think there's a massive risk when you take on any new leadership position, but I think particularly your first, and that is the kind of the expectation, perceived or otherwise, to prove yourself.
Yeah.
I know I've fallen flat on my face with that one before.
Yeah.
You know, whereas
and you're like, I'm going to be amazing. Oh wait, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think humility is so important. Humility, I love to teach, I actually teach about this in one of my programs, that when you're ready for that next big leap, it's so important for you to, you know, harness that ambition that you have and that drive that you have, but with a dose of humility. So like courage and humility. And then when you pair that with imperfect action, that's when you're really going to create you know, exponential growth in your results. When you're willing to do things and get it wrong, but you need an environment in which to feel safely. And that was actually what someone mentioned, like you know, replying to my email, is I feel like a lot of how we learn to lead is by trying things and it working, but
Mm,
trying things and it not working. And I think that's where it's so important for us, not just as women, but I think as women, we really can be very good at this, is to create that safety and that
mm,
environment that if that grow, if you really want to grow, particularly if you want to grow big, like expand your impact or your leadership or, do a lot more, then failure is part of that journey. And that is nothing to be scared of. It's nothing to get hung up about. Things won't work out, but you will learn amazing lessons from
mm.
those experiences that will take you to that next big that next big acceleration in your growth. So I think that's a really important thing as well. And as leaders, that we create the safety for people to not feel like they need to get it right all the time. That
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. And I wonder as well, like for me, there's always something about the aftershock. Like, so when you do some of these experimental actions and you're like, oh, what happens if we change that? And actually like a lot changes and stuff like cracks right open. And I think there can almost be a sense of like, oh gosh, was that the right thing to do?
yeah.
But I think that self-trust through that process is so important, so that like we are, we say that we want big action, but I think sometimes when we get big impact and big consequences, we can just feel a bit of like, oh gosh, don't put me in charge of this. Whereas it's kind of knowing actually sometimes that is exactly the right thing to happen. And when you're a disruptor, I am, and I suspect you are too, Mel, like stuff just tends to crack open when we get involved because that's
Mhm.
what we do.
Yeah.
So sort of knowing that we are part of that forward progress, and sometimes that does look like deconstruction, and that can change the ground that we're standing on, but actually
Mm.
that's also the change that we want. Like
Yeah.
it's a
Exactly.
lot to sort of process within one headspace, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the joyous things about being an external consultant or having your own business, um, is that you can really be external to the system in a way that's very fresh and intentional. And it's
Mm.
not to say you can't do it within the system. You can. It's just a bit different. I've done it both ways. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
have too.
that's pretty much why I'm now unemployable, because I just love that freedom. I'm playing myself. Like I definitely give myself a job. I think I'm pretty good. But I don't know if I could go into anybody else's system. I'm
Well,
like,
once you have that awakening, it is hard.
yeah,
You can't put the genie back in the bottle, can you? It's
that's
like,
it.
well,
Yeah,
and it's funny. I'm about to start recording a podcast episode that I haven't written yet, but like the thought is there of like, I can't do small anymore. I take up this much space now, and I
yeah,
can't go back. It,
yeah.
it's
Love
it's
that.
part of the personal growth thing, isn't it? And I
Definitely.
I think it's so wonderful when women we can get to this point where we take up as much space as we need to and want to, and we're not consciously always trying to make ourselves smaller or charge a bit less or like not really go for that thing because it might upset
Mhm.
people.
Right.
And I think what you said before, Mel, like in the beginning of our conversation around shame, that's a huge thing for us to be
Mhm.
processing through, but it is an important part of that journey together, isn't it?
Definitely, because it holds us back. And I have a lovely, really simple barometer that I like to use. I use it myself, and I encourage clients to use it when they're grappling with something, or they're in that place of indecision, or they're just feeling a bit scared. Um, uh, just debating, going over things, hesitating, just all the stuff that kind of keeps you feeling stuck. And that is the action that you want to take or don't want to take. Are you coming from a place of fear or love?
Mm,
It's the most simple thing in the world. Because what I see happen time and time again is that women really want something, they really want more, but they stop themselves from having it.
yeah.
And they stop themselves from having it because they start to feel the sense of expansion happen. And then it just can, the fear constricts them back in, like, oh, stay safe, stay safe, stay safe, sister. Don't go too far. And so it's just, being able to check in with yourself. Am I coming from a place of fear, or am I coming from a place of love? And if you come from that place of love, you can never go wrong.
Mm.
If you make your decisions from that place, in my experience anyway.
Oh, thank you. Those are wise words and very much needed. Now, Mel, I know that you have a really exciting new program for women leaders that
Yes,
is
I do.
launching currently / very, very soon. Tell us about that.
So I will. So I am inviting women to join me for a 12-month experience. It's called the Awakened Women Leadership Experience. I'm very, very excited about it. It really is. I've kind of identified in the last 20 plus years of doing the work that I do a new archetype that I feel is really emerging. And I call her the Awakened Woman. And she is a woman who is really here to create a lasting legacy in the world and has that calling that we were talking about. You know, she really feels called to make a meaningful difference in the world through her work. She's likely feeling frustrated, perhaps bumping up against herself or bumping up against the structures that she's currently working within. But she's really ready to dance to the beat of her own drum, to have a lot of balance and freedom in her life, and to have that much bigger sense of impact. So it's a blended program. It's got a retreat element, which is very exciting. So I'm actually just beginning to invite women into the program right now. So there's a retreat in September in New England, and there's also going to be one in the spring as well for people who can't make September. But the program is a blend of private coaching with me, group coaching, guest speakers who are real experts in their field. And we have live events. A lot of it's done online and virtually. I really want to help unlock that next level of impact and legacy for the women who join. So yeah, it's for women who have a business, or it could be women who are working in the business world as leaders. So there'll be a blend. I'm really excited about that kind of cross-pollination, actually. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about it.
Awesome. Where can people go to find out more about that, Mel?
So I don't have anything about it on my website yet. In fact, on my LinkedIn page, there is information about it on my LinkedIn page, so you can get some info there. And there's also info about the retreat, because some women might just want to do the retreat and get that injection of strategy and nourishment and just indulgence. It's going to feel very indulgent. So there's information on my LinkedIn page about the program and about the retreat.
Amazing. Now, I thought it might be cool if we each share like sort of one parting thought for women who lead, whether that's women in independently owned businesses, women who are still in their corporate workplace, women who are not in either of those categories, but still have enjoyed watching this and have that spark of leadership within them.
I think if you're being called to more, you know it. You know it. It lives within you. The core of my work is about helping women to really learn to trust and connect with their inner wisdom and their heart versus being overruled by their head and their logical reasoning minds. There's a place for that, but we do not want her to be making all the decisions. So I think my kind of call or my piece of advice would be, take time. I'm going to give you a practical piece of advice. Take time each day to connect within. Go within before you go out with, is what I love to encourage people to do. Take 5 minutes each day to check in with yourself and really connect with what you're being called to create in the world, who you're called to be in the world, and then create some space to allow that to flourish and to become more fertile, whether that's through journaling or having a conversation or tuning into a conversation like this and getting inspired with ideas. So yeah, for me, it would be take that time to go within and listen to what your wise woman wants to tell you.
I love it. And Mel, we are so aligned. We are so on the same wavelength, because mine is listen to that voice that you have. Because I think exactly what you're saying. I think when we are called for more, when we have the spark of an idea that we're not living our best life, and actually there's a dream that we have, if we will even allow ourselves to say it out loud or even say it internally to ourselves, sometimes it shows up as like just this sort of restlessness or frustration, or like feeling like, oh, what is the point of my life? And you know, when you're outgrowing your current environment, and it's just like you're ready for something bigger. I think sometimes we have so much fear, and like we've said, the shame, but also just that feeling of like, who am I to like have a bigger
Yeah.
vision for life, and like look at the state of the world and all this kind of stuff. But I think if you're watching this, if you're listening, and you have that inner prompting, like, what would it look like to explore that instead of suppress
Mm.
it? Like, what would it look like to let it speak, even if it's something that you entertain with yourself at first? Like,
Mhm.
it's all about taking that next step, isn't it? And
Yeah.
we don't realize that we're doing really exciting things at the moment that we're doing them, but once we've done them, we're really glad that we did. So
Mhm.
it's all about just the everyday. What will you permit yourself to speak? What will you permit yourself to do? What new journey are you ready to start out on? Yeah, I feel like those two things went together really nicely
Yes,
with each other, didn't
perfectly.
they?
Definitely. And you live your life forward and you understand it backwards. And I think
Yeah.
we search for, we want it to feel really neat and tidy before we take the leap. Sisters, it does not work out. It doesn't work like that. Well, I've
Mm-mm.
never experienced it in that way.
No, it's
Have
messy
an
as anything, and
inkling,
it's
you have a nudge,
unscripted.
yeah, and then you take the leap, and then it's like, oh, magical, miraculous things begin to happen, and it's almost like it was planned that way. It's
Yeah.
like, yes, that's because it is. But you
Oh,
have to
I
take
love
the
it.
action. Yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely do. Absolutely do. And we don't always know what we're getting ourselves into. Like when I started my business, I did not know that like it would go this far. I only had the bandwidth to think about that far ahead
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
journey. So we don't always know what we are building at the time that we're doing it, but like get in the adventure, like live the life that you're called to live. Absolutely.
exactly. Yeah, amazing.
Oh, Mel, I've loved this
Me
conversation. Thank you so
too.
Um, much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
If you're watching this on the replay, then do connect with both of us on LinkedIn. We would love to talk to you
Definitely.
if the things that we've been saying have resonated. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you all again soon.
Thank you.